Hey everyone, welcome back to Wise Guys Garage. In today's video, we're going to be working on my 1994 Ford F-350. It has always been a dream of mine to retro mod one of these trucks. In this video, we're going to be discussing on how you can put one of those dashboards into your own truck. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Alrighty guys, let's take a look at what we have here. So this dashboard right here is out of a 2016 F-150. They are the exact same between the F-150 and F-350. The only real difference is the little cubby right underneath here on the dashboard. And the Super Duties, the F-250 and 350, essentially just says Super Duty there. There's a key lock and a little spot. And then the side panels that show, on this side it says F-150, but on the F-250 and 350 it just says whatever number that the dash came out of. Now that we got that all squared away, other than that, they're pretty much the exact same. So I developed a kit, and the reason why I developed the kit was I had a lot of struggles when I did this swap myself, because there's a lot of cutting and modifying and things along that nature that you would need to do in order to make the stuff that came from the truck from the factory work. And you know, at the end of the day, I just don't have those skills to do something like that, unfortunately. If you are out there at home and you wanted to do this yourself, you can pretty much just remove the stuff from your truck, plug it into where it needs to go, and call it a day. Alrighty guys, before we go any further, there's a couple things that we are going to need to address and make sure that you have before we start modifying this dash to fit into your OBS Ford. As you can see here, you are going to need your dash core, and then you are going to need to purchase the kit. I'll leave a link in the video description that I specifically designed in order to install this dash into your truck. For starters, get that kit. Get everything for it, because everything will pretty much be plug and play if you decide to go that way. A couple other things you're going to need: some self-tapping screws, some dust collection tube that's 2.5 inches in diameter. I'll leave a link in the video description of which one I use. Some zip ties, and these are the ones that I went with: 5/16, 1 inch, metal gauge, whatever, self-tapping. And then you're going to need the little ones that are 1/2 inch. I'll leave a link in the video description for those. Some various tools, like something like that, a little drill, an angle grinder, because we are going to need to cut some stuff off of this guy. That should pretty much do it for the components that you need. All right, let's get this guy flipped on its backside so we could separate it from its dash brace system. Now the reason why we want to do that is we got to cut some things, and of course we don't want to ruin the plastic, and we also have to cut a little bit of the plastic as well. So we got it sitting on its face. There's going to be a bunch of screws that we have to pull out. So for starters, you'll get your complete dash. Now we got to remove all the copper screws. At this point, you got the entire dashboard completely stripped, just the skin. There's nothing else attached to it. No other vents, no other panels, nothing. This is what you want to be left with before we continue. You're going to take a cutoff wheel and cut along this line of the dashboard. You cannot miss it. It's literally already there for you. Up here on this little bubble, follow the curvature of the dash and basically go straight across to the other side there. I'm going to put a piece of tape along the edge of this guy just so you guys can see exactly what spot of the dashboard I'm talking about when it comes to this center point here. If you want to follow it as a guide, absolutely do so. But I'm telling you right now, pretty much impossible to mess up if you follow the instructions. So I got my tape here. I'll line it up here. It's nice and bright so you can't miss it. See how it follows the angle of the dash? The curvature of the window is pretty much the same as the OBS Ford, and that's the reason why you cut it along that line there. And the reason why you're cutting it is because this dash is deeper than the one that comes in the truck. When you cut it like this, it pretty much fits like factory. So you, like I said, you can't miss it. So now that you have your tape lined up, you don't even need a guideline for these areas because this panel pops off. I recommend doing so. And I recommend doing this not with a cutoff wheel or a Dremel. The reason why I'm saying not to use it that way is you're going to need a decent amount of power to cut through this plastic. If it's too weak, it's going to bind. And what happens when it binds? It bounces up and it's going to scuff the dash. So I'm going to do it right in front of you guys, because I'm telling you, it is super easy to do it with an angle grinder. And the way you want to have it set up is the wheel has a little lock nut on it. If you can, point that away from the dash. Because if not, if you run it along the top here, it's going to scuff this. Okay? So let's get started. Now don't worry about the burrs or anything like that. But this guy is junk. Don't need it. Now let this cool off a little bit because it's still pretty hot. You can take a razor blade or a file and deburr this. But all these melted edges and stuff, and this little peg right here, you can just cut that guy. There's no... Now a quick little trick to get rid of these little white burrs. Just get yourself a nice little file and just drag it across. And I am not using damn near any pressure, and it just peels it right off. Take your time, get it all deburred, make it look as if it was supposed to be this way from the factory. Alright, I'm going to fast forward through all this now that you get the idea. And just like that, you can see right there, the trim looks absolutely wonderful. No issues whatsoever. Everything's all nice and smooth. I was a little off here, but I can assure you, you'll never see that anyway. And it's not a big deal, guys. So if you have the same thing happen where the angle grinder cuts in a little bit further than it needs to, don't worry about it, okay? I took those two little tabs. I just used like little wire cutters. You can just cut that straight off the way it is right there. Looks good. And the same for this side. So I deburred everything. Everything's nice and smooth. You're all set with the dash plastic for now. Now the next thing to address is the dash frame itself. This looks extremely overwhelming at first, and you might think, oh, it's super complicated, yada, yada, yada. But in reality, it's really not that bad, guys, okay? There's just a couple cuts we need to make in order to make this fit like a glove, and then you guys should all be good to go. So let's go ahead and get started and get cutting on all these things. Alrighty, guys, I got everything all marked out. First thing I'm going to do is take off this wiring harness. Now that we're left with a completely bare dashboard frame, it's time to start cutting. But before we cut, let's take a look at close-up spots on where we're exactly cutting. You really don't need to cut that much of this dash frame up. I think the bulk of it is going to be on the driver's side because we're going to reuse that aluminum housing. Because why not? It's just specifically designed for this truck, so if it's there, might as well use it. For the side clearance here, ignore this line here. You don't need to cut that far. Where my white line starts, comes straight down and goes directly down to here. We're going to need to cut this guy off because this will hit the right side of the firewall if you don't cut that. And then we don't have the provisions for the alignment pins that are here on our firewalls, so that guy's got to go. You can see I marked this is towards the firewall. Since this is where the defrost vents were, we're going to need to remove that too. And you want to leave a little bit of meat here because this provides bracing for that piece of the dash. So leave a little bit of meat. I got about a 1/4 inch there. And then you want to curve it just like I got here so it doesn't hit the little lip that's right underneath the window. And then that should give you a nice, good fit and finish. You're going to want to cut this bracket off completely. We don't need this guy. He can go. Cut absolutely as much as you can off. Do not cut into this dash frame here as much as possible because we are going to be reusing it. This guy's got to go. Again, cut that flush, make that all nice. That guy does not need to be there. And if you purchase my HVAC plenum, that will hit and interfere if you leave these in place. So they absolutely have to go. Now for here, this is where your center console will be if you choose to do so. But you are going to need to cut this either way. Go ahead and cut this straight across, right above this oval here. And it should pretty much be level with this guy, like that. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but just cut that much off and you should be good to go. Now for here, basically, we're gonna cut directly along this frame piece here. This absolutely has to stay. This is gonna provide bracing for this piece. And then everything else across here, okay? Along this line, this is where your steering column would mount if you were to reuse this. I highly recommend not doing this and just reusing the aluminum stuff that comes in your truck from the factory. So we're gonna cut right along this line right here. And then we're gonna cut on this side along this weld mark that you see. And then we're gonna cut perfectly along that line to get rid of that. Straight down, like you see there. And then underneath, same as the upper half. Cut it so you retain this bracket and you retain that weld that's right there, but you don't cut this piece off because we absolutely need this. But you got to get the majority of this chunk out. This is probably the hardest part of this entire dash swap, is cutting this dash frame up. They don't have to be super duper precise, but you have to understand if you cut too much off here, you can't add on to it. So I gave you guidelines on where you need to cut. It's the exact same as what we did over there. Actually a little bit less because that side sticks out more. But you want to go on an angle, leave as much meat as you can here. Basically just catch the edge of that hole and come straight down like it is right there. And other than that, you should be pretty much good to go for your cuts on this side. Sorry, minus this one right here. Same type of cut as we did on the other side. Leave the weld, give yourself about a 1/4 inch, go straight up and then a little bit on an angle. And then everything should clear nice. Sorry, I forgot one more cut. See this white line? You want to go straight across to this and then right like this. So basically both sides of this square that you see right here, you're going to be bolting the dash to the truck with these holes and provisions here. But we're going to be doing it the right way and using a riv nut into the firewall and installing it, so then this is super secure and it ain't going anywhere. All right, so I'm going to put you guys on the stand. Let's get cutting. Alrighty, so this is pretty much what you should be left with when it comes to the dash frame itself. That entire centerpiece is missing that used to hold the original steering column for the newer style dash. This side right here, this has all pretty much been cut. The other side that we have right here, you can see as well, that's pretty much all cut up, ready to go. We got rid of all that extra bracing that we don't need in our case, and that should pretty much be it. This dash brace is pretty much good to go. And the same thing with the plastic housing on the outside. All I did last night off camera was just deburr it and everything along those lines. So you should pretty much be ready to go when you cut the stuff that I mentioned earlier. There's a couple more little small pieces that we have to cut, but we want to do that when it's installed, so all those things are lined up perfectly when it's in the truck. So, like I said, I'm going to get you guys in the back of the truck. These are the newer style seats, by the way. I actually swapped these in from same year truck, 2018 F-150. And then that should pretty much be it. So let's get started. The next thing that we have to do is get the brace in. So you can see I just de-loomed part of the harness, and the reason why I did that is we're going to shift some of the wiring around. You don't necessarily need to redo any of the wiring, we just have to move it some so it actually like sits and reaches and gives you plenty of slack to do everything we need to get done. So right now I just have the dash frame sitting in the truck. I haven't attached it or anything. We're going to go over that in just a second, but door lock harness is sitting on the back of the firewall as it should from the factory. We are not touching that at all whatsoever, and you don't need to yourself. And honestly, the majority of the wiring harness that does need to get shifted around really is pretty much from the center vent right there across to the right up to where these plugs are on the bottom right hand corner, where that little like fender plastic piece goes. So other than that, you should already have your pieces all cut out, pretty much ready to go. All these pieces and everything are all good to go there as well. And the only thing really we have to do is first, before we actually install this and sit it into the truck, we want to make sure the truck itself is level. So as you can see right there, I have mine just sitting in my driveway on the cowl of the truck, and it seems to be sitting pretty level. I checked on the roof liner, I checked on the hood and a flat spot, not where that little ridge is, and everything seems to be checking out really good. So I'm pretty confident in the truck itself being level, because we don't want to actually level the dash and then, you know, the truck itself is unlevel. So yeah, it would just not sit right and look all crooked and stuff, and we want to make sure it's absolutely straight and dead on. So I have some reference points that we're going to be referring to. That is going to be this bottom hole. We're always going to start all our measurements from here and then move our way upward. Now, as you can tell with the self tappers I have here, it took me a bunch of tries to make sure we found the spot that was absolutely perfect. You guys should not have this many holes. Matter of fact, you should really only take one to get it to sit exactly where it needs to be. So without further ado, I'm going to show you a trick on how I hold the actual dash frame in place, and then we can get started on getting this guy situated. But before we actually do the situate this, we want to make sure that you have this part of the harness de-loomed, so when we do have the dash frame in and situated, we're able to make that look nice, and everything should be good to go from there. So I'm going to get you guys on the tripod, and then we can get this all situated. All right, so like I said, you want to make sure that you have your wiring harness just sitting there in place. It doesn't need to be all connected or anything like that. and you have your steering column out. All those things are already much ready to go. Now, what I like to do is grab a couple zip ties and then put it through the center of the dash frame. I use two to make our leveling adjustments before we put a screw, or self-tapper in this case, just to hold it in place. I'll show you guys what we're going to do after the self-tappers and everything are all leveled and situated. We're going to be installing riv nuts into the firewall, so if you do need to go out and remove this, you're not, ruining the firewall like I did in order to get it situated. Because once we get this all squared away, I'm going to give you guys the measurements, and then we should be good to go, and then you don't have to experiment on your truck or your Bronco. And you can pretty much just follow along basically. And now it's just sitting on itself, and it's not going to fall back like that. Alrighty guys, this is what you should be left with when you get the actual frame of the dash in the truck. Let's discuss the alignment situation. And you want to make sure when it's actually installed that everything's nice and level. And in order to do that and to temporarily hold it in place, I use a zip tie. And you want to make sure that you have that, because we're going to discuss a little bit later on why that's important to do some adjusting. And then you basically want to just make sure the bubble is set level. Now, before you actually level the dash, you want to make sure the truck itself is level. So go ahead and put it on a level surface. I put the levels itself on the cowl of the truck, and then because that's pretty much the flattest point in front of the truck itself, and you should pretty much be good to go. Now for the wiring, I'm actually developing the fuse box bracket at the moment. I'm printing the test piece out, but this is what we're looking for right about here. I'm not exactly sure if it's going to work on manual transmission trucks. I'm going to have to see if I can find somebody who can test it for me, and then we can move forward with that and go forward from there. But the design of it is going to be pretty much just sitting right there. And no, I didn't basically like cut up the harness and extend wires or anything like that. This is completely the factory harness. We did not modify the dash harness at all whatsoever. So we got it all mounted up. I reused the top bolt hole right here. We're going to brace it against the firewall right there, and it's going to hold that back and not allow it to move at all whatsoever. This thing is going to be nice and strong. And the same thing for the same process in like the middle of it. We're going to go through all of that in just a second. So like I said, level it out. Good tip that you could do when you're installing this frame, just let it rest in the truck for just a little bit. Grab some zip ties, loop it around the dash frame just to hold it forward a little bit. And then you want to align it so the top of the dash frame pieces are like this. This is the one that's going to give you a little bit more of adjustment up and down, of course, because it's a little bit easier to move with. But on the passenger side, let's take a look at what that's looking like. As you can see, it's pretty much right underneath the dash, or the top of the lip right here. And that would give you a general idea on where you want to have it situated. I am going to grab some measurements and see if I can get like a template made, so you have a way to align it with that little dowel there, and then on the bottom of this brace. So when you guys install it, you can like push the piece of plastic in, rest this on the bottom of the brace, just shoot a self-tapper in there just to hold it in place in the meantime, and then go forward from there, just so you guys are aligned vertically. Because that's one thing that's very important. If you put the dash too low, the center console is just never going to fit right. And, on top of this lip right here, it would look kind of ugly and everything. So you just want to make sure that you got all your ducks in a row and all that stuff is all situated. And there's a reason why I left the zip tie in there, because we're going to use that to do our slight adjustments and little tweaks and whatnot. So first thing, make sure it's over the center piece. There's two pins in the center here. We're going to push those in, and we're going to push this guy over these lips like that, and then That's good. The majority of the dash is actually installed. That's pretty much it, guys. You just have the frame and stuff in place now. Now, unfortunately, now the next step is we have to take the dash out and then get everything prepped so we could get like the HVAC system ready to go, then the instrument cluster and stuff like that, because that we can all fit without the actual plastic part in place, and then everything else should be pretty much doing as the dash itself is out of the way, the plastic piece. You could do everything else, all the wiring and stuff, with the frame in place. Okay. Grab this guy, set him aside. All right. Now those brackets that I told you to grab from Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever you want to buy them, you're going to want to modify just one side of them. You just want to cut a little bit of it off and then give it a little bit of a tweak similar to this. It's nothing crazy. You just want to have it so the hole is pretty close to the top. The reason for that is if you go around, you can take a look and see that the part that you want attached to the frame here is right up to the top there. So you don't want to have a huge tab sticking out like that and then bolting into place. Now I am going to reuse the factory mounting points for the dashboard, and since we have the zip tie pretty much holding it in place exactly where we want it to be, the only thing we really got to do is just shoot a couple self-tapping screws into it to hold the bracket. And if you guys want, you can weld it. It's totally up to you. This is just galvanized, so I'm going to avoid welding it. And pretty much just shoot them in place. That's literally it, guys. Now, one of the most common misconceptions when people look at these dashboards and they see that they're in like the older truck, they think that like essentially you have to rewire the entire vehicle. Well, in that case, that just isn't true at all, really. All of the wiring from the original dashboard actually does reach everywhere that it needs to go very well. The only real thing that you have to do is essentially just delume everything. Now, in order to delume it, really, it's just a matter of taking a razor blade, if you prefer to do that, and just taking off all of the protective sleeves and tape and stuff like that, off the wiring. And after you have that, you're pretty much going to be left with something like this. Now, on the passenger side of the vehicle, depending or not, if you have ABS, you're going to have this, what is this, like 24-pin plug. This is for the ABS module. My truck doesn't have it. I disconnected it because it gave me problems with my instrument cluster. This is the wiper relay. That's what this guy is right here. This plug is for your blower motor, which is this one. And then you're gonna have your door switch plug, which is this little white plug here. Then you got your glove box light switch plug right here. And then your fuel tank inertia switch right here. And that essentially covers majority of the wiring that's located over here. We're not going to mess with any of the wiring at all whatsoever. We're just re-wrapping it. And I like to use the fuzzy Tesa tape for anything involving the interior because, I mean, as you can see on newer wiring harnesses, they use this stuff instead of black electrical tape, and there's a reason for it. This, if it hits the metal stuff, it's not going to be super hard surface and has that felt texture to it. So if it does hit something, it's not going to vibrate, and it also does last significantly longer than it would if you were to run like regular electrical tape. So if you just have electrical tape, sure, you can do it, but if not, it's no big deal. Now, in the center console area, you're going to have your, if you have trailer towing, that's going to be this plug right here. It's the 6-pin plug. And then this one, which you can see, is for your cigarette lighter ports. Again, we're going to be reusing those, and I'll show you exactly how you could do it. But the first step we're going to want to do is just put a few wraps on this to get a general idea on how we want it to lay out. The harness, it's kind of in place now. It looks a lot neater. Where I have ran it on my truck, we're going to follow the same exact spot because I know it works. Now, just a quick reminder, where I stopped deluming the harness is where the radio stuff is. So if you're following along, stop right at where the radio harnesses come out of the dashboard. And for now, we'll just lay this across right here. This has your HVAC system stuff. That's these 3 plugs, and then your 2 radio plugs. That's them right there. I have them laid out, and since I already did this before, all I did was just Tesa tape them together like so, and all is well with the world. And one thing that's always been a big gripe with me, and I never understood why Ford did it this way, but the PSOM module plug or connector from the factory is located all the way across the dash. Since I have the spot, and you guys do as well, if you want, you can move it to closer to the actual instrument cluster. And I'm going to show you guys where I'm going to mount it because it has this nice little convenient plug. I'm going to mount it over there when we're all set here. So that's separate by itself. You don't necessarily need to do this, but if you want, you can absolutely do so. That's all nice. This is your cigarette lighter ports. That's this 4-pin plug. This you're going to want to make sure that you have as much slack as you can, because this is the only spot that I would say is a little tight. So just one thing to keep in mind. Alrighty guys, now this is what you want your finished result to look like. You want to have the steering column all mounted in. If you can, definitely take the wheel out because that's going to get in the way. I'll show you in a second. The next thing, this is the factory glove box illumination switch plug. We're just going to tuck that to the side for now. If you guys want to splice this in, you absolutely could, but the way I'm doing it right now will not require any wiring. So leave that the way it is. I have the optional trailer plug just basically clipped into the hole there, so that stays where it is. If you have your ABS module, like I said, you could zip tie that there. Same thing with the wiper motor relay, plug that in there. This is the factory wiring clip that I just slid down for the glove box plug, and then the same thing for that there, so that doesn't get in the way. For the cigarette lighter ports, the one that has the little tab and then the little eye, we're going to be putting on the actual AC vent that goes right about here. And then the one that's a 2-pin plug, we're going to be putting on the radio bezel itself. Now what I did is I have mine zip tied in, and it sits right about here. That should give me plenty of slack for the HVAC vent piece, which clips in right about here. And then the other one, like I said, it's routed to the center. And all of the radio controls and AC controls and everything along those lines should route right into the center the way I have it here. Now, whatever way you guys want to decide to do it in this area, you absolutely could. There's no absolute mandatory way to do this stuff. It's just the way I have it here, I know reaches because I had the dash in prior to making this video. So what I did in the corner here, I took this bracket off, put a riv nut in exactly where I have it mounted. And when you guys do mount it, you use the 3D printed template piece that I'll provide to you. Goes into that little hole and it gives you the set height for this piece, and then it's just your responsibility to level it off on that side and then that corner over there. But I'll definitely give you a picture that you can use as a frame of reference for that area over there as well. Now, all these brackets, like I said, self-tapping screw installed into the dash frame like you could see, and then reusing the same screw just to make it equal, and everything is the exact same. I just used them on top there, so that's going to hold and support this brace perfectly fine, no problems whatsoever. You're going to have to basically rip this thing off in order to get it out of the firewall there. So that should pretty much do it for mounting and your wiring that you would need to do in order to make this work. If you guys aren't confident with de-looming wire and just retaping it and stuff, I'm not really sure what to tell you, but if you were willing to do this swap, I have full confidence in your ability to de-loom and retape this stuff up. It's really not that difficult. It's just so you can position it so it's a little bit neater and everything like that. And as you can see, everything lines up pretty much perfectly. All the plugs, radio stuff, everything that you would think that you need to swap out, you don't need to. It's all completely factory stuff. So like I said, that's all mounted in there. Same thing on the other side. It's mounting into that aluminum brace, and then everything's all good there. Now, let me just swing over to the other side real quick. And this is how we have it set up here. So for the light switch and the fuel tank switch, I have them coming up from above. You can see that right here. This is the fuel tank switch adapter. Or if you guys are the Bronco people and you have the rear window switch, I believe it uses the same plug, but I have it going over the aluminum mounting piece. And then the light switch, yours might be a little bit shorter because I extended it when I had to fix the harness. That's where this piece is right here. So it should end up at least right here, which should still give you plenty of slack in order to install the light switch, because when we install it, the light switch, give or take, sits about right here. So that's all good and well. Same thing with this stuff. This is your instrument cluster things that you're going to want to install after you get the dashboard in. And there's one more cut that we have to make in order to mount this guy into the dashboard itself. But other than that, that's pretty much how I have mine situated. You can use this as a frame of reference. I'm going to put a picture up of what that looks like here. And then I'll leave a link in the video description where you guys can find all these pictures, so they're easy to reference for you when you're actually installing the dashboard. Now, all the plugs and everything, I have it coming in from underneath, the ignition switch, the light switch, the hazard lights, even the shift indicator with the overdrive button and everything like that. Cruise control plug is again in the factory location. And then this is the fuse box bracket that I designed, that of course I do sell on the website. So if you guys wanted to mount your fuse box in the same spot, you absolutely could do so. The only thing that you have to realize is if you're taking this out, which you have to in order to get the dash frame and stuff in place, right? When you take this out, you want to make sure you have the fuse box plug, instead of it being about right here from the factory, you want it underneath. And that's really the only thing that you're moving from above to below. I didn't really de-loom and loom this stuff. It's pretty much all in the factory spots. I didn't touch any of that. So you guys should all pretty much have about the same slack for all of these things here. I have a couple extra connectors that you guys aren't going to have because I added keyless entry into this truck, and it requires like adding this module that's located over here. And there's a couple things that are extra to it that, I didn't hook up, like the, the horn honking and stuff like that, because there's a couple little cool things that I want to do with that later. that we just won't get involved with in this video. So the last brace that we actually have to do is going to be to this one right here that holds the driver's side dash frame in place. The passenger side, there's really no need to add any additional bracing because the majority of the dash bracing is already over there. This is the only spot that's actually a little bit loose, and we needed it to be that way because you have this little gap from the aluminum bracket, and you're going to have to bend this back just a little bit further. So that should be all good and well there too. Now you're not going to have all these extra holes here. This was me just experimenting with it and see if I can add any additional bracing, but the reality is once this tightened up to the dash and the firewall, it's really strong. You ain't got to worry about any of that. All right, so the first thing we're going to install is going to be the HVAC plenum adapter. Now, you want to have the side that has the one port located towards the right, and this little like bend upwards, or the little V right there, you're going to want to have that facing upwards, and obviously it's going to get pretty close to the dash frame, so this is the reason why you had to cut those brackets and stuff. So what I like to do is essentially just take it, slide it up, and push it forward like that. And it should pretty much stay in place. Quickly grab our hardware before it shifts. There's one. To the right. Now one thing you're going to want to do is make sure that this flap valve is actually all the way open, and to do that you're just going to want to remove it off this little vacuum pump thing, and that's just to make sure that it still actuates when you go to install the next part, or the screws that are closer to the edge of it. That's not going anywhere. This still moves exactly the way it needs to. Since we have this open here, let's discuss a couple of things. We're only going to be running 3 HVAC vents, and the reason why we're going to be running the 3 instead of 4 is we want to optimize the airflow coming out of this blower as best as we can. Now, keeping this in mind, think about this. If you're splitting the air in 4 different directions compared to 3 different directions, the amount of times the air gets split is less, obviously. So by doing so and splitting the air one less time, you get more airflow out of the blower motor to each of those vents. Now, there's a couple ways you could do this. If you guys wanna, and you're 100% set on getting the rear vents working, what you could do is just leave me a note in the purchase, or just send me an email. It's going to be on the website on shopify.com. And essentially, just let me know, because I can add the Y pipes into the purchase if that's what you decide you'd like to do. If you want to just get the 3 blower motor vents working the way I have it set up here, there should be no extra notes that you need to put in there. It's not a big deal. I can get it going. It's not a problem. And that's the way I highly recommend you guys doing that. And that's because, like I discussed earlier, you get the most airflow out of the blower motor when you have it only split 3 ways compared to 4. If you want to set up the rear blower motor vents, I don't recommend actually running the outside vent for the passenger side here. Basically, just take this guy, tuck it above there, and then have it come out through the center console vent, and then I can give you the Ys and the center console adapters that you would need for that stuff. But you basically would just have the 2 center vents for everybody here. I don't recommend taking the vents and splitting them to the point where you have one of these ports, feeding 2 air vents on the driver's side, and then the other port feeding the 2 vents on the passenger side. And then if you wanted to put the blower motor for the back there, you could. The best way that you get the optimal cooling out of this truck, because you got to realize these blower motors weren't that great to begin with, is using just the 3 vents. And like I said, that's the reason why you want to do that, and you get the most out of the HVAC system when you do that stuff. So I can actually post a video exactly right here what it looks like when you have it coming out of just the 3 vents rather than the 4, and you can clearly see that rag's moving a good amount, and the air that's coming out of the vent is quite strong. So that's the best way I would recommend doing that stuff for you. So what we're going to do now is basically just pre-cut the tube, since we know we're going to be running just those 3 vents. Should take just no time at all to get this stuff going. And I can show you guys how I tape these up and everything, just to make sure you have a nice airtight seal. So first step, we're going to grab our tubing. Like so. And basically all you guys need to do is take the tube, shove it in there. And this is going to be a tight squeeze on purpose. Like that. And then this would be a good example of what the tubing is supposed to look like when you're all set with it. So each one of these vents has a screw hole in there. You could basically just put like a small self-tapping screw in it, and it should essentially seal it up and call it a day from there, and just hold that piece in place. Now, let's say you got the screw in there already. You're going to grab your foil tape and wrap it around here, so we know for sure that that piece is airtight and it ain't going nowhere. You're going to want to take your foil tape. This vent is all sealed up and ready to go. So I got plenty of slack here, so when I actually go to install this, I use hose clamps on the outside of here, and that kit that I linked in the video description should come with 6 of them. So more than enough than what you actually need, and you might have a couple extra that you can use elsewhere in your projects. So that's a cool little plus. The next one I'm going to do is this guy. I know the vent is somewhere out here, and for this one I'm going to choose the top vent for that guy, and then the bottom one will go to the driver's side over there. Like that. That's all hunky-dory. For the driver's side, you want a bunch of slack. I'm going to go with that. Now to cut this stuff, I'll show you. I like to use a pair of wire cutters like this, or wire crimpers, whatever you want to call them. Basically, grab a pinch, poke a hole in it with it, tear it, right? Then you have the wire left, cut it, and you're done. There we go. Alrighty guys, that's pretty much it for the tubing. Like I said, you got a bunch extra, just so you have plenty of slack for everything. And then you just want to have it like tucked out of the way, so when you go to install the dash, it's not fighting you the entire time. So you have your tubing ran, all that's all good. The only one that we didn't run just yet is the one for the defrost vent, because we're going to do that last, and I'll show you why in a second. And then other than that, that should pretty much be it. So I'm going to go grab the dash skin, and then we can finally install that, and it should be good for the last time that we have to take that thing in and out. So alrighty guys, so essentially this is what you should be left with when you're about to reinstall the skin into the truck. This is after you've already cut the top piece, and there's a couple more things that we have to cut than I didn't mention earlier in the video that we definitely do have to do before we get it installed, because it's going to be pretty difficult to do while it's in the truck. The first off is going to be to cut out this plastic piece here. Now what you want to do is leave the lip where the screws bolt in. You can kind of see it from the back side there. This is so when you install the instrument cluster, you're able to basically slide it over this piece and then install it via the screw pieces right here and call it a day. And you want to make sure it's completely flat across the top here, like so. So the actual original cluster from your truck can fit with no problems whatsoever. Now, where do you get these clips from? Because if you remember right, they're the ones that are square that pop into that hole there. Well, since we all know that we don't need the airbag system for this truck, we can go ahead and take the mounting brackets that used to hold it in place off of it. And that's these 2 pins right here. So you don't have to go out and get new clips or any additional hardware. You're just gonna reuse the ones that come in here onto the bottom part of the instrument cluster. Now after that, the next thing you're gonna wanna do is make sure that your light switch is all ready to go. Now what I like to do is install the light switch and rotate it by, loosening the nut that's on there and having the plug face up vertically 90 degrees. Now if you remember, you're gonna have the aluminum housing that comes in from the top half, and then it's gonna clip in like this, and then your fuel tank switch selector is gonna go through this hole and get plugged in there. So let me get you on a tripod and I can show you guys exactly how that part was cut so we can keep moving forward. And one more thing to mention, this is a great time to go ahead and get your HVAC vents mounted up to the factory locations as if that's where they were belonged from the get-go. What I did is essentially just reuse the hardware that used to hold in that vent piece that goes across all 4 pieces here. And the reason why I did that is so, everybody has these on these dashboards and you can reuse the factory hardware so you don't need any additional tooling or anything along those lines there. So go ahead and have those mounted in there. And like I said, we're only gonna run the 3 vents here because if you run the 4th vent, you lose a significant amount of airflow when doing so. So the 3 vents that I have located are gonna be the passenger side far right, then you're gonna have your passenger center, and then your driver center. All right, now that we got that all out of the way, let's flip this dash over and show you how you can mount your light switch and your fuel tank switch selector. First thing we gotta do is pop this cover off. All right, guys, so the next step in the process that we're gonna need to do is install our fuel tank switch adapter, or if you're a Bronco guy, it's gonna be a rear window switch. You essentially just transfer all of the components in there. This clips in as if this is the factory housing. And then in order to remove the light switch, go ahead and get like a butter knife and pop it up vertically like this. Now I'm gonna be honest with you, there's a high chance that you break the switch cover when you do that. And unfortunately, this won't fix a broken switch cover. So just be super careful and keep that stuff in mind when you're doing this, okay? So you're gonna take your light switch, your fuel tank switch adapter like this, and then essentially just make sure you have the front piece facing up, like that. And then you're just gonna take the screws that used to hold in this switch from the factory. And the reason why I chose this side instead of this one is because the panels sometimes don't actually have the cutout for that side of the screws. So if you get it from a more basic model F-150, then it's not going to have that cutout. And just like that, it's all mounted up, and that's how it's going to look. Now, I know it looks kind of funny that its square is sticking out past this, but the reality is the way the dashboard sits in the truck, if it's sitting flush like this, you really can't read the front and rear part. So you're just basically going off an instinct on seeing that stuff. So unfortunately, I don't have an option to fill this cover. So what I recommend for you guys is if you have that switch there, just go ahead and reinstall it and have it sit there for now. Now for the light switch, I'm going to take that off real quick so you can see how that works. Now you're going to have to get 3 screws. These guys are a total of a 1/2 inch if I'm not mistaken. I'll confirm the measurements and leave a little note underneath the video for you guys. And I just got these at Ace Hardware. Pretty much anywhere that you get like self-tapping screws, you can grab those things. Now you're going to have a front plate that looks like this, and it's going to have that bowed up area in the back, right? You're going to take this, doesn't matter which way, as long as it sits flush when you do it, and the piece is sticking up. Put that in there, and then the opposing side, it should be like a temporary clip in. There we go. Like that. Leave our switch knob off for now. And then that should sit pretty much flush and hold that in place. Now for this part, what you got to do is make sure it's actually square, is rotate this nut here. So then the switch sits like this inside of the truck. You want the plug facing upwards, so that's so everything can reach and everything's all hunky-dory. So, like I said, have the face of the switch sitting upwards like this. And then you're going to take your screws, start them by hand, Now the next step is we have to make another cut on the dashboard. I'm going to clear all these tools out of the way and I'll show you where the cut was made. Now, in order to make this fit, there used to be a lip that covers just about here, and you essentially got to cut throughout all of this stuff here. Now, a good point of reference is basically about a 1/4 inch above this stud right here. You want to make sure that stays intact because part of your panel that covers your instrument cluster does get screwed in here. So I went in about a 1/4 inch to the right, and you go all the way down until you meet this little bevel right here and go straight across down there. And then the same thing with all this stuff. If you want to make your life easier, you can just cut straight across like this, make it a nice perfect square. And then basically you want that complete opening nice and open so everything can just basically slide right in, no friction, no parts that are in the way or anything like that, and the light switch could just be installed. Now when you go to plug in the light switch, you're going to plug it in from the top half or the actual AC vent. It's going to come in through here like this, and then you'll be able to plug that in no problem, or if not, you can reach around the side and then plug in the light switch like that. Alright, so just grab your dash skin, and you're going to want to set it in place. Nice. And to add some context here, all I'm really doing is essentially attaching the dash skin to the dash frame. And the only other thing left really at this point is to just attach the tubing to the vent adapters. Now to do this, all I really used was the hose clamps, and you just tighten them down around the vent adapter and you're pretty much done. It should provide an airtight seal as long as the hose clamp's tight enough, and basically just got to button up and put all the trim on it after that's all done. Alrighty, now this is what your final result is going to be. This is after you install all your trim, your center console that bolts right up to it, your instrument cluster, your steering wheel, your steering column, all your buttons with your button adapter bracket, if you were to get that from me as well, radio, you name it, everything. Now, I want to go over a couple things that look a little bit different from my truck compared to your guys' truck here. I could put a Coyote motor in my truck. So this instrument cluster is actually from a 2012 F-150, and I just made an adapter to make it work with the 2018 dash. The steering wheel. This is not a factory steering wheel. I got this on Amazon. It was like $250. I liked the way it looked because it had carbon fiber, and the carbon fiber, you know, why not? And the same thing with this piece right here and around the vent pieces right here as well. Now, these knobs fit directly over the HVAC knobs that are here for your truck. They are for a 2004 to 08 F-150. They're a little bit bigger. If you do order this and you want the ones for the newer knobs, please email me and I will print you the correct bracket that has the 3 knobs that are big enough for the spacing here. If you put the factory knobs that have like the little slit in them, they'll fit no problem, but they're not as big in the circumference, so there'll be a gap there. So that's the reason why you got to let me know which ones you want to run, and I'll leave a link in the video description if you want to run these newer looking HVAC knobs as well. These aren't going to work for your truck. This is 2- and 4-wheel drive. If you don't have a 4-wheel drive truck that's electronic, you know, it's just not going to do anything. I'm going to make a cover plate for this to block it off basically. The trailer backup, same thing with that. That's just not going to do anything as well. I will also see if I can make a plate to cover this up so it's out of the way. This, however, if you guys wanted to, you could absolutely make this work by just getting a 12-volt inverter that converts it to 110 and then hooking it up to this port as well here. I hooked up my cigarette lighter port, the secondary one that usually sits somewhere about here on the OBS, into this point, and I usually just clean them with a wire brush to make them look brand new again, and that's the result for that guy there. This is also from the OBS. Basically use the silver key ring that sits there and just put it back in and basically clip that in, and then that's all good to go as well. Other than that, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up here. I pretty much went over everything on what you need to do to install this into the dashboard Now, future videos is going to be showing you how you can convert the color of your door panels and actually make it last longer than 5 minutes. I've had this on here for about 4 months now. Still looks absolutely fantastic. And I didn't use the cheap stuff that you get at the hardware store like AutoZone and O'Reilly. I'll give you guys some tricks and pointers on how you can restore and dye all your plastics in your truck to make them look and fit and clean up like as if they were black from the factory. Alrighty guys, well that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Now for, like I said, future projects we're going to discuss, it's going to be how you can do your door panels and make them look brand new again, or dye them black like I did to match the dashboard. And then another thing I want to discuss that I am super excited to show you guys on is what I got going on in this engine bay. Now it doesn't sound like a big block anymore, don't it? And you heard that? You're right. And no, you're definitely not imagining things. I'm going to show you guys on how you could coyote swap your F-Series truck or Bronco for as cheap as possible in a future video. I'm in that entire swap for literally $3,000 just about. And that doesn't include me selling this off and making some of my money back. So if that interests you guys, make sure you leave a comment, subscribe, share this to your friend or family members. I'd greatly appreciate it. And YouTube offers an option now for you guys to boost the video by leaving some points and stuff. Go ahead and do that as well, because I want to get this out to as many people as possible who want to keep these old OBS Fords on the road as long as possible as well. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I hope to see you in the next one.